Everyone bet this poor girl would never divorce the CEO until she showed up with a new man at the gala. Hello, my precious, irreplaceable, and endlessly loved family. How are you, my heart's treasure? You are my sunrise in dark times, my calm in the storm, my miracle in human form. I carry you in every breath, in every prayer, in every beat of my heart. We are not bound by screens, we are bound by love deeper than oceans, stronger than time. Thank you for being my forever home, my reason, my strength. And now a prayer kissed with love just for you. Dear sweet Father of light, wrap my beloved family in your arms like a soft sunrise after a long night. Let peace pour into their souls and love overflow in every corner of their lives. Heal what hurts in silence and lift what feels too heavy to carry. May they wake with joy, rest in grace, and walk each day wrapped in your perfect love. Amen. If this message reached your soul, let the world feel our bond. Like, comment, and share, because we're more than a family. We are a movement of love. The diamonds felt cold against Amelia Peters' skin. 5 carats that sparkled under the chandelier light of Anton's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. 5 carats that weighed like shackles around her delicate earlobes, a gilded prison that matched the golden band on her finger. Amelia traced her fingertips over the jewels, feeling their sharp edges while remembering the girl she once was, a girl with dreams that stretched beyond being someone's perfect accessory. The deep brown of her eyes, once alight with ambition and hope, now reflected only candlelight and resignation. At 32, her beauty had only deepened. Rich mahogany skin that seemed to glow from within, high cheekbones that caught the light like sculpture, and a smile that everyone but her husband recognized as forced. "Do you like them?" Jonathan Pierce's voice carried that edge she'd grown to recognize, the razor-thin warning that there was only one acceptable answer. His hand rested possessively on hers, his thumb circling her wrist in what onlookers might mistake for affection. "They're beautiful," she whispered, the lie coming easily after 5 years of practice. Like everything he gave her, they were spectacular, expensive, and chosen without a single thought to her taste or desires. Amelia preferred simple gold hoops, a reminder of her grandmother who raised her with stories of strength and dignity. But Jonathan insisted diamonds better suited the wife of a man of his stature. Jonathan raised his champagne glass, drawing the attention of the other diners. At 45, he commanded any room he entered, silver temples framing, calculating, eyes that assessed everyone's value with cold precision. His tailored suit fit like a second skin, concealing the hardness beneath layers of expensive fabric and practiced charm. "To 5 years with the most beautiful woman in the city," he announced, his voice carrying across the restaurant like a performer's. Several patrons turned to smile appreciatively at the handsome power couple, not seeing how Amelia's fingers tightened around her water glass, knuckles nearly white with tension. 5 years. 1,825 days of slow suffocation. Though I must say, Jonathan continued, his smile never reaching his eyes, my wife still doesn't understand the finer points of strategy. She's just here to make me look good. His laugh boomed across the restaurant, encouraging others to join in the humiliation dressed as humor. The shame burned through her veins like poison as Amelia maintained her practiced smile. In the early days, she'd fought back. She'd reminded him of her double major from Columbia, of the marketing career she'd abandoned at his insistence when he claimed that no wife of his would work like a common woman. Now she knew better than to contradict Jonathan Pierce in public. The private consequences were too severe. "The salmon looks delicious," she said softly, changing the subject while her mind drifted to the worn journal hidden in her bedside table, the one place she still existed as herself, where dreams of freedom spilled across pages in midnight ink. Jonathan's hand covered hers, thumb pressing into her wrist just hard enough to bruise, a warning she'd learned to heed. "You'll have the fillet," he corrected. "Salmon makes your breath smell." Another small cruelty in a tapestry of wounds that had become her marriage. The waiter arrived with their meals. Her steak cooked precisely as Jonathan preferred, though she'd long ago stopped telling servers she actually liked it medium well. She cut the meat into tiny pieces, remembering how she used to love food before it became another battleground in their marriage. Later, as they walked through their mansion's marble foyer, the diamonds caught the light again. Jonathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't even bother to check the screen before turning to her. "Business emergency," he said, not attempting to make the lie convincing. "Don't wait up." The front door closed behind him, and Amelia stood in the silence of their so-called home. 10,000 square feet of designer furniture and priceless art that had never felt like anything but a museum where she was the most valuable exhibit. Her heels clicked against the marble as she climbed the winding staircase to their bedroom, each step carrying her further from the girl she once was and deeper into the prison of perfection she'd become. She removed the earrings with trembling fingers, placing them in the velvet box alongside all the other beautiful things he'd given her over the years. Each gift coincided with another betrayal, another humiliation, another reminder that she was property, not partner. Her reflection stared back from the bathroom mirror, skin like burnished copper beneath perfect makeup, eyes lined with gold that failed to disguise their emptiness. At 32, Amelia Peter had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. The woman looking back at her was a masterpiece of careful cultivation, hair perfectly styled, body toned through rigorous daily workouts with the personal trainer Jonathan insisted upon, wardrobe curated by stylists he hired to ensure she was always appropriate. The gossip columns would confirm tomorrow what she already knew. Jonathan's business emergency involved a model half his age at the Archer Hotel downtown. It wasn't his indiscretion that broke her. It was the casual certainty that she would endure it, that she had nowhere else to go, no one who would believe the truth about golden boy Jonathan Pierce and his perfect black trophy wife. Tears slid down her cheeks, marring the makeup she'd applied so carefully for their anniversary. Dinner. She didn't bother wiping them away. No one was there to see. No one ever saw the real Amelia anymore, not even herself most days. Rain lashed against the bedroom windows, matching the storm inside her heart. 5 years ago, she'd been Amelia Peter, brilliant and ambitious, with dreams that stretched beyond decorating a powerful man's arm. Now she was Mrs. Jonathan Pierce, a beautiful accessory with a smile that never reached her eyes. Tonight, like so many nights before, she cried herself to sleep in a bed big enough for two, but occupied by one. The diamonds glittered in their box on the dresser, catching moonlight through the rain-streaked windows, cold, hard, and perfect, just like the life she'd been given. As she drifted into restless dreams, Amelia found herself drawn to the window. She parted the curtains to watch storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Something stirred inside her chest, not just sorrow, but a strange anticipation, as if some part of her sensed that change was coming, that the universe was finally answering. Prayers she'd been too afraid to voice. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would bring rain-slicked roads, a broken-down car, and a chance encounter that would crack the foundations of her gilded cage forever. Chapter 2. Chance Collision. Rain hammered against the windshield of Amelia's midnight blue Bentley, turning the world outside into a blur of grey. She'd escaped the mansion after Jonathan left for his morning golf game, needing air that wasn't perfumed with his cologne and expectations. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m., still hours before she needed to be home to prepare for tonight's charity function, where she would once again stand by his side, the perfect accessory. The coastal road stretched before her, winding between cliffs, and sea in a dance of beauty that matched her internal turmoil. Out here, alone with the storm and her thoughts, she allowed herself to remember who she'd been before. The vibrant girl who'd argued philosophy until dawn, who'd dreamed of traveling to her grandmother's homeland in Ghana, who'd believed love was something that filled you up instead of hollowing you out. The car sputtered once, twice, then died completely, rolling to a slow stop on the narrow shoulder. Amelia pressed her forehead against the steering wheel, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Of course, even her escape attempt had failed. She tried the ignition again. Nothing. Rain continued its relentless assault as she reached for her phone, only to find it dead. The universe, it seemed, was conspiring against her today. Or perhaps it was just the neglect she'd shown the car. The one possession Jonathan hadn't selected for her, a graduation gift from her parents before they died. In the accident that left her alone in the world, a knock on her window startled her. Through the rain-streaked glass, she made out a tall figure beneath a black umbrella. Her heart stuttered. Jonathan had friends everywhere, eyes that reported back her every movement. But she couldn't sit here forever, and the storm showed no signs of stopping. Amelia lowered the window an inch, enough to hear, but not enough to be vulnerable. "Car trouble?" The voice was deep, warm like whiskey on a cold night. Not threatening, but not dismissive either, just human. "It just died," she replied, embarrassed by the tremor in her voice. "I'll call for assistance." "In this storm? You'll be waiting hours?" The man leaned down, and Amelia caught her breath. Raindrops clung to thick eyelashes, framing eyes that reminded her of amber in sunlight. A strong jaw softened by the gentlest smile she'd seen directed at her in years. "I'm heading back to the city. I can give you a ride, or at least let you wait in my car while we call for help." Warning bells sounded in her mind. Jonathan's constant reminders about predatory men, about how vulnerable she was without him. But beneath those taut fears stirred something else, the girl she'd been before, who trusted her own judgment. "I'm Murray," he said, holding out a hand that wasn't reaching. The grab just offering connection. "Murray Goodwin." "Amelia," she replied, deliberately omitting her married name as she accepted his handshake. His fingers were warm against her cold ones, the touch sending an unexpected spark through her body. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the rain seemed to pause between them. Murray's car wasn't what she expected, not flashy or ostentatious, but a well-maintained vintage Jaguar that smelled of leather and subtle cologne. As she settled into the passenger seat, Amelia realized this was the first. A time in years she'd been alone with a man who wasn't Jonathan or someone he'd approved. "Where can I take you?" Murray asked, pulling carefully back onto the road. Windshield wipers fighting the deluge. The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider. Back to the mansion, to a hotel where she could hide. From Jonathan's rage when he discovered she'd left, to the airport with nothing but the clothes on her back. "Just to the nearest service station would be fine," she said finally, propriety winning over fantasy. "I should have my car towed." Murray nodded, respecting her choice without question. "There's one about 15 minutes ahead. I know the owner. He's honest, won't overcharge you." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but contemplative, filled with the percussion of rain and the soft jazz playing from the car's speakers. Amelia found herself relaxing for the first time in days, maybe years. "Nina Simone," she said suddenly, recognizing the haunting voice. "My grandmother loved her." Murray's smile transformed his entire face, crinkling the corners of those amber eyes. "You know jazz? Most people your age only recognize her from commercials. Most people don't have grandmothers who believed Nina Simone could cure any heartache." The words slipped out before she could censor herself. Too honest, too revealing. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." No mockery in his voice, just genuine appreciation. Mine believed in the healing power of Miles Davis and homemade biscuits. Amelia found herself laughing, a real laugh that started in her belly and bubbled up through her chest, unfamiliar and exhilarating. Mine made cornbread that could make grown men weep. The best kind, Murray agreed, his eyes dancing between her and the road. Food should make you feel something. Everything should, Amelia whispered, not meaning to say it aloud. The look Murray gave her then, seeing through the designer clothes and perfect makeup to the hunger beneath, stole her breath. No one had really seen her in so long. Yes, he said simply. It should. They pulled into the service station, where Murray walked her inside, holding his umbrella over her head with meticulous care. The owner greeted Murray with genuine warmth, and Amelia watched their interaction with fascination. This was how real people spoke to each other, with respect unburdened by power dynamics or hidden agendas. As arrangements were made for her, a car, Murray insisted on waiting with her. "I can't leave you stranded," he said when she protested. "My mother would rise from her grave and haunt me forever." They sat in the small waiting area, steam rising from paper cups of surprisingly good coffee. Murray didn't ask about her life or why she'd been driving alone in a storm. Instead, he told her about his photography hobby, about the light on the coast after rainfall, about his sister's kids who called him Uncle M because they couldn't pronounce Murray when they were toddlers, when Murray's hand accidentally brushed hers as he reached for a sugar packet. Amelia felt it again, that spark, that reminder that she was still alive beneath the numbness. For a dangerous moment, she imagined a different life, where she could follow that feeling, where she could be a woman who chose her own path. The tow truck driver's arrival broke the spell. As they walked to the door, Murray handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything, car trouble, photography services, or just someone who appreciates Nina Simone, please call." Their fingers touched, sending electricity through both of them. Murray saw the pain behind her perfect smile, the loneliness in eyes too used to pretending. "You deserve better than wet highways and broken cars," he said, his voice warm like shelter in a storm. Amelia's phone buzzed. Jonathan, no doubt wondering where his possession had wandered. Reality crashed back like a wave, drowning the brief moment of freedom. "Thank you," she said, tucking the card into her purse where Jonathan wouldn't find it. A small act of defiance, a tiny treasure of possibility. As she climbed into the tow truck, Murray standing in the rain watching her leave, Amelia felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. A hairline fracture in the perfect shell she'd built around herself, letting in the first breath of something dangerous and essential. Chapter 3. The Garden Party Incident. 2 weeks after their chance meeting on the coastal road, the governor's annual garden party arrived, the pinnacle of spring social events. A carefully orchestrated display of wealth, power, and influence set against the backdrop of the governor's mansion gardens in full bloom. Amelia stood before her closet, hand hovering over a sunset orange dress that reminded her of African marigolds from her grandmother's stories. "Not that one," Jonathan's voice cut through her reverie. He appeared in the doorway of her dressing room, already immaculate in a tailored slate-grey suit. "It's too ethnic. Wear the blue Valentino." Amelia's fingers lingered on the orange silk. "I thought since it's a garden party, something colorful might be—" "The blue," Jonathan repeated, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "Senator Mitchell's wife will be there. She's considering my foundation for her charity allocation this year." As Amelia reached for the prescribed dress, Jonathan checked his watch impatiently. "And did you remember to confirm our dinner with the Harrisons next Thursday? I asked you 3 days ago." I forgot," Amelia admitted, the calendar of social obligations blending together in her mind. Jonathan sighed heavily, pulling out his phone. "I'll handle it as usual, and make sure you actually eat something today. The blue looks better when your collarbones aren't quite so prominent." He typed rapidly, discussing her body and her failings in the same matter-of-fact tone, as if both were simply properties requiring his management. The unspoken message was clear. Amelia was part of that presentation package. Proper, contained, acceptable. The wild, vibrant woman inside her, the one who danced barefoot to Afrobeat music in college and written poetry under moonlight, had no place at the governor's mansion. She wore the blue dress. It was beautiful, of course. A cool, sophisticated sheath that complemented her warm skin tone in a way that read elegant rather than exotic. Jonathan preferred when her blackness was an accessory to his life, not a defining feature. The governor's mansion gardens were breathtaking. Roses climbing ancient trellises, wisteria draping purple tiers over stone arches, and perfectly manicured. Hedges forming a maze that stretched toward the cliffside ocean view. Champagne flowed freely as string quartet music drifted through the afternoon air, mingling with polite laughter and the soft click of heels on garden paths. For the first hour, Amelia performed her role flawlessly, standing by Jonathan's side as he worked the crowd. She smiled at the right moments, laughed at tedious jokes, and asked thoughtful questions that made the speakers feel important while deflecting attention from herself, just as Jonathan preferred. "Jonathan, how do you manage to look better every year?" Senator Mitchell's wife air-kissed Jonathan's cheeks before turning a practiced smile to Amelia. "And you must share your secret, my dear. How do you keep your complexion so flawless?" "African black soap," Amelia replied, a tiny rebellion. "My grandmother's recipe." Jonathan's hand tightened around her waist. "My wife has all sorts of exotic, little beauty routines," he interjected with a laugh. "Women and their secrets, right, Senator?" The senator chuckled indulgently, while Amelia felt another piece of herself shrivel inside. Not just the dismissal, but the erasure of her heritage, as nothing more than an amusing quirk. "If you'll excuse us," Jonathan said, steering Amelia toward a group of developers. "Amelia, fetch me another whiskey. Neat." He released her into purposelessness, removing her from a conversation where she might say something too authentic. Amelia moved toward the bar, dignified despite the dismissal. This was the pattern. Present her as an accessory, then discard her when she threatened to be more. At the bar, she ordered Jonathan's whiskey, adding, "And a champagne, please," for herself. As the bartender poured, she felt eyes on her. Not the usual appraising glances that reduced her to decorative status, but something more penetrating, more genuine. She turned to find Murray Goodwin leaning against a nearby pillar, camera hanging. From his neck, those amber eyes regarding her with undisguised concern. "Good afternoon," he said simply, a warmth in his voice that the society around them lacked. "You're photographing the event?" Amelia asked, surprised to find him here, in this world so far removed from the authenticity of their rain-soaked meeting. "The governor appreciates my unique perspective," Murray replied, with a hint of irony, gesturing to the camera. "Though I suspect he mainly likes that I make everyone look 10 years younger." Amelia found herself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced curve of lips she'd perfected for Jonathan's events. A valuable skill in these circles. "Not as valuable as genuine beauty," Murray said softly, his gaze holding hers for a moment, that stretched between them like honey dripping from a spoon, sweet, golden, and promising sustenance. The bartender placed Jonathan's whiskey on the counter, breaking the spell. Amelia reached for it, suddenly aware of how long she'd been gone. "I should—" "Amelia!" Jonathan's voice boomed across the garden terrace. He strode toward them, his smile fixed, but eyes cold as winter glass. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost between here and the bar." Murray straightened, extending his hand. "Jonathan Pierce, I'm Murray Goodwin, the event photographer." "Of course," Jonathan replied, not taking the offered hand. "My wife must have been distracting you from your duties." His arms snaked possessively, around Amelia's waist, fingers digging into the silk at her hip. She has a talent for making men forget themselves. The implication hung in the air like poison. Murray's expression didn't change, but Amelia saw something flash in those amber eyes, recognition of the dynamic and something deeper. Sorrow, perhaps, or anger, carefully contained. On the contrary, Murray replied evenly. Mrs. Pierce was discussing the architectural features of the garden. I'm featuring them in my photo series. She has quite an eye for detail. Jonathan's laugh was sharp. My wife doesn't understand architecture any more than she understands the stock market. She's just here to look pretty. His fingers bit deeper, which she does admirably, don't you think? Amelia felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawl up her neck, staining her cheeks, despite years of practice at hiding her emotions. She saw Murray's hands tighten around his camera, knuckles whitening. I think, Murray said carefully, each word placed like a stepping stone across dangerous waters, that your wife understands far more than you give her credit for. The air between the men crackled with tension. Jonathan's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened into something predatory. You're paid to take pretty pictures, Goodwin, not offer opinions on my marriage. He turned to Amelia, his voice dripping with false concern. Darling, you look flushed. Perhaps the sun is too much for you. Before she could respond, he took the whiskey from her hand and addressed Murray again. If you'll excuse us, my wife needs to rest. Doctor's orders. She gets so emotional in crowds. Another deliberate diminishment, painting her as weak and unstable. Amelia felt something crack inside her. Not just embarrassment, but rage, hot and cleansing as it rushed through her veins. Yet years of conditioning kept her silent as Jonathan steered her through the crowd, his fingers leaving bruises beneath blue silk. What the hell was that? He hissed once they were out of earshot. Flirting with the help? Have you forgotten who you are? That was the question, wasn't it? Who was she now? The woman who'd met Murray in the rain felt worlds away from this perfect doll in a blue designer dress. I was just being polite, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He helped me when my car broke down last week. Jonathan's expression changed, calculation replacing anger. Your car broke down. Where? When? On the coastal road, Amelia replied, suddenly aware she'd never mentioned the incident. It wasn't important. Everything you do is important, Jonathan said, his voice softening into something more dangerous than anger. Everything you are belongs to me. She felt sick, the champagne turning to acid in her stomach. I need some air, she whispered, slipping from his grasp before he could stop her. Please, Jonathan, just give me 5 minutes. Perhaps it was the public setting, or perhaps he was already distracted by the senator approaching, but Jonathan merely nodded curtly. 5 minutes, then join me with the Mitchells and Amelia. His voice dropped to a whisper meant for her ears alone. Remember what happens when you embarrass me. Freedom, even temporary, felt like breaking the surface after nearly drowning. Amelia walked swiftly toward the garden maze, desperate for solitude, for one moment where she could breathe without performing for someone else's benefit. The hedges rose around her, green walls blocking out the chatter and music, until all she could hear was her own heartbeat and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. In the heart of the maze, a small fountain played, water cascading over smooth stones into a reflecting pool. Amelia sank onto a stone bench, fingers tracing the cool surface as tears threatened to spill. Not for Jonathan's cruelty. That was familiar terrain, but for the glimpse of another possibility, another life where she was seen rather than displayed. They say if you make a wish in a fountain at the heart of a maze, even the universe can't deny you. She looked up, startled to find Murray standing at the entrance to the small clearing, camera lowered, respect in his posture. He wasn't approaching, merely offering his presence. "I followed to make sure you were all right," he said simply. "I can go if you prefer to be alone." The correct answer was yes. The safe answer was yes. But the woman who'd once danced barefoot, under stars, whispered, "Stay." Murray moved to sit beside her, leaving careful space between them. For a long moment they watched the water cascade in comfortable silence. "He's wrong, you know," Murray finally said, voice gentle as a summer breeze. "About all of it. About you." No one had challenged Jonathan's vision of her in so long. Amelia turned to look at him, really look at this man who saw beyond the perfect exterior to the woman drowning beneath. "You don't know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Murray replied. "I know your eyes light up when you talk about your grandmother. I know you have opinions you hide behind smiles. I know the woman I met in the rain isn't the woman your husband." Parades around. His honesty stole her breath. Amelia felt stripped bare, not in the way Jonathan's critical gaze undressed her, but in a way that reached her soul. Tender, terrifying, true. "What if that woman is gone?" she asked, a confession she'd never spoken aloud. "What if there's nothing left beneath the perfect wife he created?" Murray's hand moved across the stone bench, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel its warmth. "I don't believe that," he said, his amber eyes holding hers. "I think she's still there, waiting to be remembered." Something broke open inside Amelia's chest, not shattering but blooming, like flowers after too long a winter. A single tear escaped, tracing the curve of her cheek. Murray lifted his hand, thumb hovering near her face, asking permission with his eyes. When she didn't pull away, he gently brushed the tear from her skin, the touch reverent. "I should go back," she whispered, though everything in her wanted to lean into his touch, to follow this feeling wherever it might lead. "I know," Murray said, understanding in his voice. He didn't try to convince her otherwise, didn't make demands or promises he couldn't keep. Instead, he reached for his camera. "May I take your picture? Just once, as you are right now. No stylist, no designer clothes, no performance. Just Amelia, vulnerable and real." She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion closing her throat. Murray lifted the camera, capturing her in that suspended moment between captivity and flight, between the woman she'd been forced to become and the woman she might still be. The shutter clicked, preserving something true amid all the lies. "Amelia." Jonathan's voice shattered the moment, distant but approaching. "Where are you?" Panic flashed through her, but Murray stayed calm. "Go left at the next turn, then right." "Twice," he said quickly. "It leads to the main path. I'll go the other way." Before she could move, he pressed a small card into her palm. "If you ever need anything, anything at all." Their fingers intertwined for one heartbeat too, a connection more intimate than any touch she'd felt in years. Then she was moving, following his directions, emerging onto the main garden path moments before Jonathan rounded the corner. "There you are," he said, irritation barely concealed. "The Mitchells are waiting. Fix your face, you look emotional." Amelia took a deep breath, tucking Murray's card and the memory of his gentle touch into a secret corner of her heart. The mask slipped back into place as she took her husband's arm, the perfect wife once more, but something had changed. In the heart of the maze, a wish had been made, and somewhere deep inside, the woman who'd been silenced was beginning to remember her voice. Chapter 4. Midnight Messages. 1 month after the garden party, Amelia sat alone in the bedroom she shared with Jonathan. The silver frame on her vanity held a lie. Her and Jonathan on their wedding day, his arm possessively around her waist, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. 5 years later, that smile had perfected itself into something believable to everyone, except the woman who wore it. Amelia traced the edge of the frame as she removed her earrings, the silence of the empty mansion pressing against her skin like a physical weight. Jonathan had left that morning with an overnight bag and a perfunctory kiss on her cheek. Quarterly review in San Francisco, he'd said, not bothering to make eye contact. Back tomorrow night. She hadn't asked questions. Questions led to accusations. Accusations to anger. Anger to those cold silences that lasted for days. Instead, she'd nodded and wished him a safe flight, the perfect corporate wife performing her role flawlessly. Now, alone in their bedroom, Amelia opened the drawer of her nightstand and removed the card Murray had pressed into her palm 3 weeks earlier. She'd hidden it beneath her journal, away from Jonathan's occasional inspections of her belongings, invasions of privacy he called keeping her safe. The card was simple, thick cream stock with Murray Goodwin embossed in charcoal grey, a phone number beneath. Nothing to indicate his position or status, just his name and a way to reach him. She'd memorized both, yet kept the card like a talisman, physical proof that someone had seen her, truly seen her, and offered connection without demands. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Would contacting him be crossing a line? Was it betrayal to seek simple human kindness from someone other than her husband? The questions tangled in her mind like thorny vines, products of Jonathan's careful cultivation of her isolation. The chime of her phone startled her, a news alert, not unusual, as Jonathan insisted she stay informed about matters that might affect his interests. But the headline froze her blood. Tech mogul spotted with models in Vegas. The accompanying photo showed Jonathan entering the Bellagio, his hand on the lower back of a willowy blonde San Francisco Quarterly Review. The lies fell away like scales from her eyes, leaving raw truth exposed beneath. This wasn't the first time, but it was the first time the evidence had appeared so boldly, so publicly. Something shifted inside Amelia, not heartbreak, for that implied a heart still intact enough to shatter, but a final severing of illusion. Her fingers moved before her mind caught up, typing Murray's number with trembling precision. "This is Amelia Peter," she wrote, then deleted Peter and typed Pierce instead. Even in this small rebellion, Jonathan's ownership marked her. She deleted the message entirely and started again. "Murray, it's Amelia. From the garden party." As if he wouldn't remember. As if their connection had been as forgettable as the canapes. Or the string quartet. The 3 dots appeared immediately, as though he'd been waiting for her message all these weeks. Perhaps in some way, he had been. "The woman from the fountain," came his reply. "I was hoping you'd reach out." No judgment. No questions about why she was contacting him at 11:47 p.m. Just acknowledgement and gentle welcome. "I hope it's not too late," she typed, suddenly aware of the hour. "Never too late," he responded. "For anything that matters." The words blurred, as unexpected tears filled Amelia's eyes. When was the last time anyone had implied that her needs, her thoughts, her existence mattered beyond their utility to someone else? "I don't know why I'm messaging you," she confessed, fingers hovering over the truth but unable to type it. "I'm lonely, I'm trapped. I saw my husband with another woman and felt nothing but relief that tonight at least he won't be in my bed." "Sometimes we don't need to know why," Murray replied. "Sometimes we just need to know we can." A tear splashed onto the screen of her phone, not from sadness but from recognition. Murray spoke to the woman she'd been before Jonathan, the one who believed in possibilities rather than limitations. "What are you doing right now?" she asked, changing the subject away from dangerous emotional terrain. "Editing photos from a sunset." "A shoot at the cliffs," he answered. The light was incredible, gold turning to amber, then deepening to copper before the blue hour began. Amelia closed her eyes, imagining those colors, the transition of day to night captured by someone who truly saw beauty rather than merely possessing it. "I'd love to see that," she whispered to the empty room, then typed the words and sent them. Before she could reconsider, "I'd love to show you," came his reply, followed by an image that took her breath away. The photograph framed the coastal road where they'd first met, but transformed by magic hour light. The cliffs glowed like burnished gold, the ocean beneath them a tapestry of indigo and violet. A single figure stood silhouetted against the horizon. A woman, her arms outstretched to the fading light, freedom in every line of her body. "Who is she?" Amelia asked, transfixed by the emotion the image evoked. "Someone finding her way back to herself," Murray replied. "I call it becoming." Amelia studied the photograph, seeing herself in this unknown woman, not as she was, but as she might be, free, unfettered, connected to something larger than the narrow confines of her gilded cage. "It's beautiful," she typed, the words inadequate for the emotions swelling in her chest. "Beauty recognizes itself," came his reply, simple yet profound. They exchanged messages that crossed boundaries Amelia had forgotten existed: art, music, dreams, disappointments. Murray described growing up with his grandmother in New Orleans, surrounded by jazz that shaped his childhood. He told her about saving 3 summers lawn mowing money to buy his first camera. Amelia shared buried fragments of herself, her poetry, her Chicago childhood, her grandmother's jollof rice recipes. She described the stories that connected her to ancestors and her abandoned dream to open a gallery for artists from the African diaspora. "What happened to that dream?" Murray asked. Amelia stared at the question, the answer too complicated and too simple all at once. Jonathan happened, his insistence that such a venture was beneath his wife's station, his gradual dismantling of her independence under the guise of taking care of her, her slow surrender to the path of least resistance. "Life," she replied simply. "Dreams don't die," Murray wrote. "They just wait for the right season to bloom again." Dawn found Amelia curled in the window seat of her bedroom, phone clutched to, her heart like a love letter. Outside, the world awakened in gentle brushstrokes of pink and gold, colors she now saw through Murray's eyes. Not just light, but possibilities. Her phone chimed one last time as exhaustion finally claimed her. "Thank you for reaching out, Amelia, for trusting me with your thoughts. Sleep well, knowing someone in this world sees you, truly sees you, and is grateful for the privilege." As she drifted into dreams, Amelia felt something stir within her chest, not the violent passion of infatuation or the desperate need of loneliness, but something quieter and far more dangerous. Hope, possibility, the first tendrils of a self long dormant, reaching toward light. Outside her window, a cardinal landed on a branch, its brilliant red plumage stark against the morning sky, one small creature claiming its right to brilliance in a world determined to subdue color. Amelia watched it spread its wings and take flight, envying its freedom, even as something inside her began to remember how it felt to soar. For the first time in years, she fell asleep, not trying to escape her reality, but dreaming of changing it. And somewhere across the city, Murray Goodwin placed his phone beside his pillow, closed his eyes and dreamed of a woman by a fountain, tears on her cheeks and courage in her heart, reaching toward becoming. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. 3 weeks of midnight text conversations with Murray had awakened something in Amelia, a quiet certainty that another life was possible. Now, as she prepared for the Crystal Charity Ball, this newfound awareness made the performance of Perfect Wife even more unbearable. The ball was the crown jewel of the social season, an evening where the city's elite gathered in their finest to perform generosity under crystal chandeliers. Amelia stood before her. Mirror, a vision in gold silk that draped her curves like liquid sunlight. The dress had been Jonathan's choice, as always, to match the donations we'll be making, he'd said with calculated magnanimity. They hadn't met in person since the garden party. That would have crossed a line Amelia wasn't ready to acknowledge, much less step over. But in the digital realm between midnight and dawn, she had rediscovered pieces of herself, long buried beneath the perfect wife Jonathan had crafted. "Ready?" Jonathan appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his tuxedo, power emanating from him like a force field. At 45, he was still handsome in that sharp-edged way that photographed well for magazine covers, though the years had hardened rather than softened his features. "Almost." Amelia fastened diamond drops to her ears, not the anniversary diamonds which she'd hidden away, but an older pair that carried fewer memories of humiliation. Jonathan approached, his cologne announcing his presence before his reflection, appeared behind hers in the mirror, his hands settled on her bare shoulders, thumbs pressing into the knots of tension that never quite disappeared from her muscles. Once, she'd mistaken such touches for affection. Now she recognized the appraisal, in them checking his possession for flaws. "You'll be on your best behavior tonight," he said, voice silk over steel. "The governor will be there, and the Morgans are flying in from New York specifically for this event." Of course. Amelia reached for her clutch, a movement that dislodged his hands from her skin. A small victory, but she collected those now, storing them like treasures. The crystal ballroom lived up to its name, thousands of faceted pendants catching and fracturing light into rainbows that danced across marble, floors and silk-covered walls. Amelia moved through the crowd on Jonathan's arm, playing her role with practiced perfection, laughing at the right moments, asking thoughtful questions, then fading into ornamental silence when Jonathan took center stage. "Pierce, there you are." Harold Morgan, silver-haired and barrel-chested, clapped Jonathan on the shoulder with the familiar ease of old money greeting new. "And the lovely Mrs. Pierce, more beautiful every year." Amelia offered her hand, which Harold kissed with old-world courtesy. "You're too kind, Mr. Morgan." "Harold, please. After all, I've known this rascal since his first million." Morgan laughed, heartily. "He couldn't afford you back then." "A wise investment," Jonathan replied, his arm tightening around Amelia's waist. "Beauty appreciates while companies depreciate. Isn't that right, darling?" The casual objectification washed over her like acid rain, familiar in its burn. Once, she would have smiled through it. Tonight, something shifted beneath her ribs, a tectonic plate of dignity refusing to be submerged any longer. "I believe. You're thinking of art, Jonathan," she replied, her voice honeyed but firm. "Women aren't investments, we're people." A heartbeat of silence followed her correction. Harold's eyebrows lifted slightly, and Jonathan's fingers dug into her side, warning bells clanging in his touch. "My wife, the philosopher," Jonathan said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "She's been reading feminist literature in her spare time." "Adorable, isn't it?" "Actually," Harold's wife, Catherine, interjected, "I find it refreshing. Too many conversations at these events feel scripted." She gave Amelia a conspiratorial smile. "Perhaps you'd join me at the ladies' room? These shoes are divine torture, devices." The invitation was transparent but welcome, a lifeboat tossed to a drowning woman. Amelia nodded gratefully, extricating herself from Jonathan's grip with practiced grace. "Don't be long," Jonathan murmured, his lips brushing her ear in what would appear to observers as affection. "And remember who you are." That was the question, haunting her lately. Who was she really? The woman who exchanged literary recommendations and philosophical debates with Murray until dawn, or the silent ornament Jonathan paraded at events like this? In the opulent powder room, Catherine squeezed her hand. "You don't have to explain," she said simply. "I was married to a Harold type before Harold. I recognize the signs." Amelia met the older woman's eyes in the mirror, seeing unexpected alliance. "There." "I don't know what you mean," she replied automatically, the denial reflexive after years of careful facade maintenance. Of course not, Catherine said gently. But if you ever need resources, legal, financial, emotional, I have contacts. She pressed a business card into Amelia's palm. Women supporting women isn't just a slogan on a tote bag. The gesture of solidarity lodged in Amelia's throat like unspilled tears. She tucked the card into her clutch beside Murray's, her collection of lifelines growing. When she returned to the ballroom, Jonathan was holding court near the stage, surrounded by men in identical tuxedos with identical expressions of deference. Amelia approached slowly, in no hurry to re-enter his orbit of control. Through the crowd, she caught a flash of familiar amber eyes. Murray, moving through the periphery with his camera, documenting the evening for whatever society publication had hired him. Their gazes locked for a heartbeat, electricity arcing between them across the crowded room. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just held her eyes with an intensity that asked a single question. "Are you all right?" She offered the smallest nod. Not all right, perhaps, but surviving, not drowning, at least not tonight. Murray's answering nod carried understanding beyond words before he disappeared into the crowd, leaving Amelia both bereft and strangely strengthened by the brief connection. "There you are," Jonathan's voice cut through her thoughts as he reached for her elbow. "They're about to announce the major donors. Remember to smile." The stage lights were blinding as Jonathan guided her up the steps to join the other benefactors, being recognized. The MC, a local news anchor with perfect teeth and practiced sincerity, introduced each couple with effusive praise for their generosity. And finally, Jonathan and Amelia Pierce, whose contribution of $2 million to children's literacy programs continues their tradition of extraordinary philanthropy. Applause thundered through the ballroom as Jonathan stepped to the microphone. Amelia positioned precisely half a step behind him, visible but secondary as always. "Thank you," Jonathan began, his public voice warm and charismatic, so different from the cold precision of his private tones. "My wife and I believe deeply in giving back to the community that has given us so much." The lie was seamless. Jonathan's philanthropy was calculated for tax advantages and networking opportunities, the causes selected for their popularity with potential clients rather than any genuine concern for societal improvement. "Amelia in particular," Jonathan continued, turning to draw her forward with a hand at her waist, "has a personal connection to this cause. Perhaps she'd like to say a few words." The invitation blindsided her. Jonathan never shared the spotlight, never allowed her to speak publicly without carefully scripted and rehearsed remarks. Suspicion flickered through her mind even as she stepped forward, determined not to show her surprise. The microphone felt foreign in her hand, the expectant faces of the crowd swimming before her in a sea of wealth and privilege. Somewhere among them Murray was watching, his camera capturing this moment. The thought steadied her. "Thank you," she began, her voice finding strength with each word. "Literacy changed my life. My grandmother raised me on stories, not just reading them to me, but teaching me that through books I could visit worlds beyond our Chicago apartment. Those stories gave me wings when reality tried to clip them." The words flowed from some authentic place she'd almost forgotten existed, a wellspring of truth beneath years of performance. Every child deserves that gift, the ability to see beyond their current circumstances, to imagine themselves into new possibilities. That's not charity, it's justice. A ripple moved through the crowd, not disapproval, but surprise at hearing genuine passion rather than practiced platitudes. Amelia felt Jonathan stiffen beside her, but she continued, unable to stop now that she'd begun. "When we talk about giving back, we should remember that literacy isn't a luxury we bestow from above, but a fundamental right. These programs don't just teach children to read. They teach them they have the right to dream beyond the boundaries others have drawn for them." She handed the microphone back to the MC, heart pounding against her ribs like a bird testing the strength of its cage. The applause that followed held a different quality than before. Not the obligatory recognition of wealth, but appreciation for unexpected authenticity. Jonathan's fingers circled her wrist as he guided her from the stage, his grip just shy of painful. "What the hell was that?" he hissed through his perfect smile as they descended the steps. "You didn't stick to the points we discussed." "We didn't discuss any points," Amelia replied, the adrenaline of public speaking still coursing through her veins. "You surprised me. I wanted to see what you'd say without preparation," Jonathan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as they reached the bottom of the stairs. "A test you failed spectacularly. Justice? Fundamental rights? You sound like a community organizer, not my wife." The contempt in his voice should have wilted her as it had countless times before. Instead, it kindled something rebellious in her chest. "I spoke from the heart," she said simply. "Your heart should reflect my values," Jonathan snapped, guiding her toward a less crowded corner of the ballroom with a hand that looked supportive but felt like shackles. "My wife doesn't understand philanthropy. She's just here to look pretty." His voice carried just far enough to reach the ears of a cluster of donors nearby. "Can't you do anything right?" The familiar humiliation burned through her, but this time, rather than dampening her spirit, it ignited something new. The weeks of midnight conversations with Murray, of being seen and heard and valued, had planted seeds of self-worth that were finally breaking through the carefully tended soil of Jonathan's control. "Don't," she whispered, pulling her arm from his grasp. "Not here. Don't tell me where I can discipline my wife," Jonathan replied, alcohol and anger sharpening his words into weapons. "You're decorative, Amelia, not functional. Remember your place." Each word landed like a physical blow, but instead of shrinking beneath them, Amelia stood taller. Across the room, she caught sight of Murray, his camera lowered, concern etched across his features as he watched the interaction from a distance, not interfering, but bearing witness to her pain. In that moment, something crystallized within her, not just anger or hurt, but clarity. This wasn't love. It had never been love. It was possession, control, ownership. And for the first time, Amelia truly understood that she deserved more. "My place," she repeated, her voice soft but steady. "Is that what I am to you? A possession to be placed where it's most convenient?" Jonathan's eyes narrowed, unused to direct challenge. "You're being dramatic. We'll discuss this at home." "No," Amelia said, the single syllable carrying the weight of years of silent acquiescence. "I don't think we will." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, each step carrying her further from the man who had spent years convincing her she was nothing without him. She didn't look back to see his reaction, didn't pause when she heard his sharp intake of breath behind her. In the quiet of the ladies' lounge, Amelia leaned against cool marble, heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. Her phone vibrated in her clutch, a news alert that felt like divine timing. Tech mogul's wife speaks from the heart at charity gala. She clicked through to find an image of herself at the microphone, face alive with passion, Jonathan's displeasure barely concealed. Beside her, the accompanying article praised her refreshingly authentic perspective on philanthropy and noted the visible tension between the power couple. As she scrolled, another notification appeared, a text from an unfamiliar number. "Your speech was beautiful. He doesn't deserve you. Check your husband's messages with Elise." Elise, her supposed best friend, the woman who organized ladies' luncheons and spa days, who whispered gossip about other wives while swearing loyalty to Amelia. Cold certainty washed through her as she opened Jonathan's backup messages on their shared cloud account, the one he thought she didn't know how to access. The evidence was there in black and white, not just Elise, but a pattern of betrayal stretching back years. Women in every city he visited, sometimes multiple women in the same week, but it was Elise's messages that cut deepest. Not just the betrayal of her body, but the cruel jokes at Amelia's expense, the planning of rendezvous while pretending, friendship to her face. Anger rose like a cleansing flame, burning away the last vestiges of doubt and fear. This wasn't about jealousy. How could she be jealous over a man she no longer loved? This was about dignity, about truth, about refusing to participate any longer in her own diminishment. With steady fingers, she typed a message to Murray. "Can you meet me? Now? Please." His response came instantly. "Name the place." She named a hotel across town, neutral territory, away from the watching eyes of Jonathan's social circle. Then she walked out of the crystal ballroom without a backward glance, leaving behind not just her husband, but the carefully constructed prison of her marriage. In the taxi, Amelia watched the city lights blur past the window. For the first time in 5 years, she was moving towards something instead of simply enduring what was. Tomorrow would bring consequences, recriminations, perhaps even threats. But tonight she would reclaim one piece of her shattered self. The woman in the gold dress stepped out of the taxi, head high, eyes clear. Inside her chest, a heart long dormant began to remember how to beat, not just for survival, but for possibility. Chapter 6. Freedom's Price. The Westmore Hotel lobby glowed with understated elegance, all polished marble and soft lighting designed to make even the weariest traveler feel momentarily royal. Just 3 hours after fleeing the Crystal Charity Ball, Amelia sat in a high-backed chair near the fireplace, still in her gold gown, a vision of wealth and privilege that concealed the turmoil beneath. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her phone again. 12 missed calls from Jonathan, 3 voice messages she couldn't bring herself to play, a text from Elise asking if she was okay after that little scene, the concern as false as everything else in their friendship. When Murray entered, his eyes found hers immediately across the expanse of the lobby, as though some invisible thread connected them. He'd changed from his event attire into jeans and a simple button-down shirt, his camera bag slung over one shoulder. Even in casual clothes, he moved with a quiet confidence that drew glances from other guests. Not the demanding presence Jonathan cultivated, but something warmer, more genuine. Amelia rose as he approached, suddenly conscious of how this might appear. Her in evening wear, him arriving at her summons, the hotel setting ripe for misinterpretation. But Murray's expression held no presumption, only concern. "You're safe." The question was simple, direct, prioritizing what mattered most. Amelia nodded, unexpected tears threatening at the gentle inquiry. When had anyone last asked about her? Safety rather than her appearance or usefulness? "I can't go home," she said quietly, the reality of her situation settling around her shoulders like a heavy cloak. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever." Murray didn't ask for explanations, didn't press for details she wasn't ready to share. Instead, he gestured toward the hotel restaurant. "Have you eaten? We could talk over dinner." The normalcy of the suggestion, food, conversation, basic human needs met without agenda, nearly undid her. Amelia shook her head, unable to imagine sitting in public, making small talk while her life imploded around her. "I've already checked in," she said, holding up a room key card. "Room service might be better. I can't face people right now." If Murray had any thoughts about following a woman he barely knew to her hotel room, his expression revealed none. "Whatever you need," he said simply. The suite was impersonal, but luxurious. Neutral tones and generic art that could have been anywhere in the world. Amelia slipped off her stilettos with a sigh of relief, padding barefoot across plush carpet to the window overlooking the city lights. Murray remained near the door, maintaining a respectful distance that both soothed and saddened her. How conditioned she had become to expect intrusion, to brace against unwanted touch. "You can sit," she said, gesturing to the small sitting area. "I don't bite." "Never thought you did," Murray replied, setting his camera bag down carefully before taking a seat. "Though I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to." That startled a laugh from her, a real one, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Murray smiled in response, the expression transforming his face from handsome to breathtaking. "Are you hungry?" he asked, reaching for the room service menu on the coffee table. "I'm told the pasta here is excellent." "I couldn't eat at the Gala," Amelia admitted. "Too nervous, too—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the constant vigilance required to be Jonathan's perfect wife in public. "Surveilled?" Murray suggested. Gently, the accuracy of the word struck her like a physical blow. "Yes," she whispered, "exactly that." While Murray ordered pasta for him, soup and bread for her, sparkling water for both, Amelia gathered her courage. When he hung up, she took a deep breath and spoke the words aloud for the first time. "I'm leaving him." The declaration hung in the air between them, irrevocable once spoken. Murray nodded slowly, his expression serious but unsurprised. "Because of tonight?" he asked. Amelia shook her head, moving to sit across from him, her gold dress pooling around her like liquid light. "Tonight was just the final straw. I found messages between him and my friend Elise. They've been—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the betrayal still raw despite her lack of love for Jonathan. "I'm sorry," Murray said, and unlike the hollow sympathies she'd grown accustomed to, his words rang true. "Not for the end of your marriage, but for the pain he's caused you." The distinction mattered. Amelia studied his face, the amber eyes that saw her, truly saw her, the strong jawline, softened by compassion, the mouth that spoke truth instead of convenient lies. "He'll make it difficult," she said, facing reality squarely. "Jonathan doesn't lose, ever." "And yet, tonight he did," Murray observed. "When you walked away." The simple recognition of her courage brought fresh tears to Amelia's eyes. She blinked them away, refusing to cry over a man who had never deserved her tears. "What will you do?" Murray asked, not pushing but offering space for her thoughts to form. "I don't know yet," Amelia admitted. "I have my own money, not much, compared to his, but enough to start over. My grandparents left me a trust he couldn't touch, though he tried." A bitter smile crossed her lips. Jonathan always said they didn't trust him. Turns out they were right. The arrival of room service created a momentary pause in their conversation. As the waiter arranged their meal on the small dining table, Amelia caught sight of her reflection. In the window, still outwardly the perfect wife in her designer gown, but with something new in her eyes. Resolution, determination, the first glimmers of freedom. When they were alone again, Murray waited for her to take the first bite before starting his own meal. The simple courtesy, allowing her to set the pace, to lead rather than follow, was so far removed from Jonathan's controlling behaviors that Amelia felt tears threaten again. "The soup is good," she said, focusing on the immediate to avoid being overwhelmed by the enormity of what lay ahead. "Small pleasures matter," Murray replied, twirling pasta around his fork. "My grandmother always said a good meal could carry you through a bad day." "Mine said the same about a good story," Amelia remembered, smiling at the memory. "She'd tell me tales about our ancestors in Ghana when things were hard, how they survived the impossible, so I could too." "Tell me one," Murray said, leaning forward slightly, genuine interest lighting his features, and so she did, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. A story her grandmother had told about a village woman who outsmarted a greedy chief. As she spoke, Amelia felt something unlock inside her chest. a door long closed, creaking open to reveal treasures she'd forgotten she possessed. Murray listened without interruption, his attention a gift she'd almost forgotten how to receive. When she finished, his smile held appreciation without assessment, enjoyment without evaluation. "You tell stories like you were born to it," he observed. "Like the words live inside you, waiting for the right moment to emerge." The compliment, focused on her abilities rather than her appearance, warmed her more than the soup had. "I used to write," she admitted. "Before Jonathan. Poetry, mostly. Little stories, nothing important." "Important to whom?" Murray challenged gently. "Art doesn't need to hang in galleries or sell millions to matter. It just needs to express truth." The simplicity of his perspective swept away years of Jonathan's conditioning, his insistence that nothing was worthwhile unless it commanded attention, created envy, generated profit. "I haven't written in years," Amelia said, the realization a fresh wound. "I'm not sure I remember how." "You will," Murray replied with quiet certainty. "Some things the body doesn't forget, like riding a bicycle, swimming, creating." Their meal continued, conversation flowing more easily than Amelia had experienced in years. Murray told her about his photography, about capturing moments of authentic connection in a world increasingly dominated by performance and pretense. She found herself laughing at his stories, offering opinions without fear of correction, existing fully in her skin for the first time in memory. As the evening deepened, so did the reality of her situation. Tomorrow would come with consequences. Jonathan's rage, society's judgment, practical challenges she'd been insulated from during her marriage. "I'm scared," she admitted finally, the confession easier in the gentle darkness that had fallen while they talked. "Not of him exactly, of failing, of discovering that he's right, that I am nothing without him." Murray was quiet for a long moment, considering her words with the seriousness they deserved. "Fear makes sense," he said finally. "You're dismantling a life, even if it wasn't the one you wanted. But Amelia..." He leaned forward, his gaze steady on hers. "I've known you for all of 6 weeks, mostly through text messages, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that you are anything but nothing." The conviction in his voice reached places inside her that had withered from neglect, bringing them tentatively back to life. Not romantic declarations or empty flattery, but recognition, seeing her value not as an extension of someone else, but as herself, complete and worthy. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming tonight, for listening, for..." She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the gift of being treated as a human being rather than a possession. "Any time," Murray replied, rising from his chair as midnight approached. "Day or night, Amelia. I mean that." He gathered his camera bag, moving toward the door with no expectation of staying, no presumption that her vulnerability was an invitation. The respect in his departure was as meaningful as his presence had been. At the threshold, he turned back to her, expression serious. "Whatever you decide, whether you go back tomorrow or never return, trust yourself first. Not him, not me, not anyone who claims to know what's best for you." Amelia nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. "Good night, Murray." "Good night, Amelia." He hesitated, then added softly, "Freedom has a price, but from what I've seen, you're more than strong enough to pay it." After the door closed behind him, Amelia stood in the silent hotel room, gold dress, shimmering in the low light. For the first time in 5 years, she made a decision based solely on her own needs. She reached for her phone and called a divorce attorney whose card Catherine Morgan had pressed into her palm earlier that evening. "This is Amelia Peter," she said when the answering service picked up. "I need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible." Peter, not Pierce, the beginning of reclaiming herself, one piece at a time. Chapter 7. Rising from Ashes. 3 weeks. After walking out of the Crystal Charity Ball, Amelia stood in her new apartment, surrounded by cardboard boxes and rental furniture. The space was modest by her recent standards, a 2-bedroom in an Art Deco building downtown, with high ceilings and worn hardwood floors that creaked beneath her feet. Nothing like the pristine mansion she'd left behind, with its marble floors and manicured gardens. Nothing like the gilded cage that had slowly suffocated her spirit. Here, sunlight streamed through uncovered windows, painting golden rectangles across the wooden floor. Here, no housekeeper would silently judge her unmade bed or less than perfect appearance. Here, for the first time in 5 years, she could breathe without measuring each inhale against someone else's expectations. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Jonathan. After the initial explosion of rage when she'd failed to return home, his tactics had shifted to calculated manipulation. Flowers delivered daily to the hotel where she'd stayed that first week. Public statements about his concern for her mental health. Private threats about what would happen if she proceeded with the divorce. Amelia deleted the message without reading it, a small act of self-preservation that still felt like victory. Her lawyer had advised minimal contact, all communications, filtered through legal representation. He's used to controlling the narrative, Sandra Kim had explained during their first meeting. Our job is to change the story. The doorbell's unexpected chime startled her. Amelia approached cautiously, the habits of fear still fresh. Through the peephole, she saw Murray holding a small potted plant, his expression uncertain. Her heart performed a complicated dance in her chest, part joy, part anxiety, part something deeper she wasn't ready to name. They hadn't seen each other since that night at the hotel. Text messages had sustained their connection, Murray respecting her need for space while ensuring she knew she wasn't alone. Now he stood at her door, crossing a boundary from digital comfort to physical presence. Amelia smoothed her hands over her simple cotton dress, so different from the designer clothes that had filled her closet at Jonathan's, and opened the outdoor housewarming gift. Murray said by way of greeting, holding out the plant. African violet, my grandmother always said new beginnings need something alive and blooming. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, connecting to her heritage, honoring her grandmother's memory, brought unexpected tears to Amelia's eyes. She accepted the plant, their fingers brushing in a contact that sent warmth flowing up her arm. Thank you, she said, stepping back to allow him entry. It's still a bit chaotic, but it's perfect, Murray finished, taking in the half-unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture with appreciation rather than judgment. It feels like you. The observation struck her. What did feeling like her even mean after years of being molded into Jonathan's ideal? Yet looking around, Amelia recognized truth in Murray's words. The books already lining makeshift shelves, the colorful throw pillows she'd impulsively purchased, the photographs of her grandparents prominently displayed, all expressions of self she'd suppressed within Jonathan's carefully curated aesthetic. Tea, she offered, leading him toward the small kitchen where she'd at least managed to unpack the essentials. Love some, Murray replied, following at a respectful distance. He moved differently than Jonathan, no assumption of ownership over the space he entered, no expectation that his presence commanded attention. Just a man visiting a friend, carrying no agenda beyond connection. As Amelia filled the kettle, Murray leaned against the counter, his amber eyes taking in details, the African print dishcloths hanging from the oven door, the collection of spices already arranged on the counter, the cookbook open to a jollof rice recipe. You're cooking again, he observed. Nodding toward the cookbook, Amelia followed his gaze, realizing he'd noticed something she hadn't consciously acknowledged. Yes, she said slowly, I am. Another reclamation. The family recipes Jonathan had deemed too ethnic for their dinner parties the creative pleasure of preparing food with her own hands rather than instructing staff. The kettle whistled, breaking the moment of revelation. As Amelia prepared their tea, chamomile for her, Earl Grey for him, preferences shared during late-night text conversations, Murray studied a photograph of her grandparents. "You have her smile," he said. "Your grandmother's. It reaches her, eyes just like yours does. When it's real, the distinction mattered. The performance smile she'd perfected as Jonathan's wife versus the genuine expression that transformed her entire face. Murray saw the difference, valued authenticity over perfection. They settled in the living room, Murray taking the worn armchair while Amelia curled into the corner of her newly purchased sofa, legs tucked beneath her in a casual posture Jonathan would have corrected immediately. "How are you?" Murray asked, the simple question weighted with genuine concern. Really, Amelia considered deflection, the habitual "I'm fine" that had become her shield. But Murray's steady gaze invited honesty, creating space for complexity rather than performance. "Scared," she admitted. "Relieved, angry, free." She sipped her tea, gathering scattered emotions into coherent thought. "Some moments I can hardly breathe from the fear of failing, of being alone, of discovering I've forgotten how to exist outside his shadow. Other moments I feel like I'm flying." Murray nodded, understanding without need for explanation. "Freedoms like that," he said, "terrifying and exhilarating at once, like standing at the edge of a cliff with newly discovered wings. Not sure if they'll hold you, but knowing you can't stay on solid ground any longer." The metaphor resonated so perfectly that Amelia felt seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "Yes," she whispered, "exactly that. The wings will hold," Murray said simply, certainty in his voice. "You're stronger than you know." Coming from Jonathan, such words would have been patronizing, a pat on the head, an assessment from above. From Murray, they were recognition, acknowledgement of strength already present rather than bestowed by his perception. "The media coverage has been difficult," Amelia confessed, setting her teacup on the coffee table. The tabloids had been relentless. Tech mogul's wife flees. Mansion, mental breakdown or midlife crisis. The society circles she'd navigated as Jonathan's wife had closed ranks around him. The wealthy protecting wealth as they always did. "People fear what they don't understand," Murray replied. "A woman choosing freedom over comfort, authenticity over security. It threatens the bargains others have made with themselves." His insight cut through layers of shame and doubt. Amelia had never considered that her choices might hold mirror to others' compromises, that the viciousness of the gossip might stem from recognition rather than judgment. Jonathan's telling. "Everyone, I'm having a breakdown," she said, anger flickering through her voice. "That I need help, not divorce papers." "Of course he is," Murray said, not dismissing her anger but validating it. "He can't accept that you left by choice. It would mean admitting he's not the center of the universe." The observation startled a laugh from her, rusty but genuine. Murray smiled in response, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that made her heart perform that complicated dance again. "I filed the official papers yesterday," Amelia said, the declaration both terrifying and liberating. "No turning back now." "Are you sure that's what you want?" Murray asked, the question free from judgment or agenda. Not pushing her toward divorce or reconciliation, simply ensuring her choices remained her own. "Yes," Amelia replied without hesitation. "The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was admitting to myself that I should have left years ago." Murray nodded, understanding the complexity of her journey without requiring explanation. Recognizing the cage is often harder than opening the door, they fell into comfortable silence, afternoon light shifting across the floor as clouds moved across the sun. Amelia studied Murray's profile, the strong jaw and thoughtful eyes that had begun appearing. In her dreams, Not just attraction, though that existed undeniably, but recognition of something kindred, something true. "My sister called yesterday," Murray said eventually, setting his empty teacup aside. "She's having surgery next week. Nothing serious, but she'll need help with the kids afterward." "That's why you came today," Amelia realized, "to say goodbye." "Not goodbye," Murray corrected gently. "Just see you later. I'll be in Boston for a couple of weeks, 3 at most." Relief washed through her, followed immediately by concern over her reaction. Was she already becoming dependent on his presence, replacing one man's influence with another's? The fear must have shown on her face because Murray leaned forward, his expression serious. "Amelia," he said quietly, "whatever this is between us, friendship, connection, possibility, it needs to unfold at your pace, not mine. You're reclaiming yourself after years of being defined by someone else. That journey comes first." The understanding in his words, not just of her situation, but of her need for autonomy, touched something deep within her. No demands, no expectations, just respect for her process of becoming. "I'll miss our conversations," she admitted. Vulnerability. Easier with him than it had ever been with anyone else. "Phones work in Boston," Murray replied with a smile. "And honestly, some distance might be good. Gives you space to find your footing without..." He gestured between them, acknowledging the attraction neither had verbally addressed. As the afternoon deepened toward evening, they talked of ordinary things, books they'd read, music they loved, Murray's upcoming photography exhibition. Amelia shyly showed him the leather journal where she'd begun writing again. The pages held poems that traced her awakening, verses about gilded cages and newly tested wings, about silenced voices finding their song again. One poem titled "Becoming" described the moment of seeing her true reflection after years of viewing herself through someone else's eyes. "These are extraordinary," Murray said, his finger tracing a line about freedom's first uncertain flight. "Your words create images more vivid than any photograph." "They're still rough," Amelia demurred, though pride colored her voice. In these pages, she was reconciling with her past while claiming her future, each poem a stepping stone across the river between captivity and freedom. When Murray finally rose to leave, the air between them felt charged with unspoken possibility. At the door, Murray hesitated, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath. 3 weeks, he said softly. "And then, if you're ready, maybe dinner? A real date, not a crisis meeting in a hotel room or a housewarming visit." The invitation, framed as option rather than expectation, sent warmth spreading through Amelia's chest. "I'd like that," she replied, allowing herself to acknowledge the attraction that had been building between them since that rainy day on the coastal road. Murray's smile transformed his face, joy unrestrained by calculation or pretense. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle as he raised her fingers to his lips. The brush of his mouth against her skin sent electricity racing up her arm, a current of connection so different from Jonathan's possessive grip. "Until then," he said, releasing her hand reluctantly. "Until then," Amelia echoed, her skin still tingling where his lips had touched. After he left, she stood in the center of her new apartment, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, possibilities yet to be explored. Outside her window, the city stretched toward the horizon, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk gathered. Inside her chest, a heart long guarded, began to consider the risk of opening again, not rushing headlong into replacement attachment, but gradually allowing trust to rebuild on foundations of her choosing. Amelia placed the African violet on her windowsill, fingers gently touching the velvety purple petals, something alive and blooming for a new beginning. A perfect metaphor for the tender hope taking root within her heart. Chapter 8. The Storm Breaks. 3 weeks stretched into an eternity. Though Murray's texts from Boston arrived faithfully, morning check-ins, evening reflections, photographs of his niece and nephew with frosting-smeared grins, Amelia found herself longing for his physical presence with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. "You're coming back tomorrow?" she typed on the 20th evening, curled in the window seat of her apartment while rain tapped gentle fingers against the glass. "Early flight lands at 10:15, came his reply. "Still on for dinner?" Amelia smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "Yes, I've been practicing my cooking skills on your sister's recipes." His response came with a laughing emoji. "Brave woman, Emily's jerk chicken has been known to set off fire alarms in 3 states. This ease between them, playful, honest, expectant, felt like discovering a new country after years in exile. Not the breathless infatuation she'd felt during her whirlwind courtship with Jonathan, but something deeper, built on genuine knowledge rather than projection and performance. Sleep came fitfully that night, anticipation and anxiety tangling beneath her ribs. By morning, dark clouds had gathered over the city, promising the first real storm of the season. Amelia moved through her day in a dream state, meeting with her lawyer in the morning, where Sandra provided updates on Jonathan's latest delaying tactics, then spending the afternoon preparing for dinner with Murray. The apartment gradually transformed under her hands, fresh flowers on the dining table, candles on the mantel, music flowing softly from speakers. The woman who arranged these things felt simultaneously familiar and foreign to Amelia. Not Jonathan's perfectly composed wife, but not quite the carefree girl she'd been before him either. Someone new emerging from the chrysalis of her marriage, stronger for having survived it, wiser for recognizing the cage she'd lived in. At 6 o'clock, her phone chimed with a text from Murray. "Flight delayed by weather. Now landing at 7:30. Still coming, just later. Save me from airport food." Disappointment mingled with relief. More time to prepare, to calm her racing heart. Amelia adjusted the timing on the oven, checked her appearance in the mirror once more. The woman who looked back wore a simple emerald dress that draped her curves without constraining them, her hair falling in natural curls rather than blown straight as Jonathan had preferred. Her makeup was minimal, a celebration of features, rather than a mask to hide behind. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, a bass counterpoint to the jazz playing softly through the apartment. Rain began in earnest, sheets of water cascading down the windows, transforming the city lights into impressionist paintings of color and movement. When the knock finally came, 3 gentle taps at 8:42 p.m., Amelia's heart performed a complicated dance in her chest. She opened the door to find Murray standing in her hallway, slightly damp from the rain, his travel-weary face lighting with a smile that stole her breath. "I come bearing gifts," he said, holding up a small package wrapped in brown paper. Emily's homemade hot sauce, which should probably be classified as a weapon in most states. Amelia laughed, stepping back to let him enter, conscious of the electricity that seemed to arc between them even without touch. "I've set the table on the balcony, but with this storm, rain check on the balcony," Murray suggested with a grin, shrugging off his jacket to reveal a simple button-down shirt that complemented his amber eyes. "Literally," Amelia agreed, taking his jacket and inhaling the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with rain. "How was your sister?" "Recovering well. The kids ran me ragged." Murray moved into the apartment with comfortable familiarity, noticing the changes she'd made since his last visit. "You've been busy. It feels like home now." The observation warmed her. Home. Not a showplace or a fortress, but a sanctuary of her own creation. Dinner unfolded with the easy rhythm they'd established in text messages. stories of Murray's time in Boston flowing into updates about Amelia's divorce proceedings. Jonathan's latest tactics had turned nastier. Financial accounts frozen, mutual, friends choosing sides, whispers about her mental stability circulating through society circles. "He can't stand losing," Amelia explained, refilling Murray's glass with wine. "Especially not something he considers his property." Murray's expression darkened momentarily. "You were never property, Amelia, no matter what he made you believe." The simple truth in his words touched places inside her still tender from years of Jonathan's ownership. "I know that now," she said softly. "I'm learning to remember the woman I was before him. Before I forgot I belonged to myself first." Outside, lightning fractured the sky, illuminating Murray's face in stark relief, the strong jaw, compassionate eyes, mouth that smiled so easily yet spoke with such care. Thunder followed immediately, directly overhead, making the windows rattle. "In their frames." "That was close," Amelia murmured, rising to move toward the windows. The storm had intensified, wind driving rain sideways against the glass. As she reached to draw the curtains, the lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the apartment into darkness. Perfect timing. Murray's voice came from behind her, humor rather than concern in his tone. "Where do you keep candles?" "Already." "On the mantel," Amelia replied, grateful she'd arranged them earlier. "Matches in the drawer beneath." In the darkness, she heard his movements, careful steps across the room, the scrape of a drawer opening, the distinctive scratch of a match being struck. Warm light bloomed, illuminating Murray's face as he lit the first candle, then the next, casting the apartment in a golden glow that danced with the shadows. "Better?" he asked, turning toward her with the last candle in hand. Amelia nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. In the candlelight, with the storm raging outside and the world reduced to this small circle of warmth, the barriers she'd carefully maintained between them seemed gossamer thin. Murray must have sensed the shift, his expression growing serious as he set the candle down. "Amelia," he said, her name a question in his mouth. She moved toward him, drawn by forces stronger than gravity, than reason, than the caution that had governed her since leaving Jonathan. "Murray," she answered, stopping within arm's reach. Lightning flashed again, thunder cracking immediately after, nature's percussion emphasizing the moment suspended between them. Rain lashed the windows like impatient fingers, urging them forward. "I've wanted to kiss you since I saw you crying by that." "A fountain," Murray confessed, his voice low and steady despite the admission. "But I promised myself I wouldn't rush you, wouldn't be another man who took before you were ready to give." The honesty of his words, the respect inherent in his restraint, touched Amelia more deeply than any passionate declaration could have. Here stood a man who saw her boundaries as sacred rather than challenges to overcome, who understood that her journey back to herself came before his desires. "What if I'm ready now?" she whispered, closing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the pulse fluttering at the base of his throat. Murray's hand lifted slowly, giving her time to step away, if she chose. When she remained still, his fingers brushed her cheek with exquisite gentleness, tracing the curve of her jaw as though memorizing her through touch. "Are you?" he asked, the question holding no demand, only care for her certainty. In answer, Amelia rose on tiptoe, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat quickening beneath her palm. "I've wanted to know how you taste since you gave me water at that garden party," she admitted. "Like kindness has a flavor I'd forgotten." A smile touched Murray's lips, not triumph but joy, pure and unguarded. His hand slid to cradle the nape of her neck, thumb brushing the sensitive skin beneath her ear in a caress that sent shivers cascading down her spine. "I've been told I taste like patience," he murmured, humor dancing in his amber eyes. "Let's find out," Amelia breathed, closing the final distance between them. Their first kiss held no hesitation, no awkward negotiation of space. Murray's lips met hers with perfect pressure, neither claiming nor retreating, but meeting her as an equal in this dance of discovery. Warmth bloomed in Amelia's chest, spreading outward until her fingers tingled with it, until she felt she might glow like the candles illuminating their embrace. When they parted, breathless and flushed, Murray rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed, as though savoring the moment. "Worth the wait," he whispered. Outside, the storm continued its percussion against the night, thunder rolling like distant artillery. "Some storms wash away what needs clearing," Murray murmured against her hair. "Others bring what's been needed all along." "And this one?" Amelia asked, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Both, I think," he replied thoughtfully. "We're weathering two storms, aren't we? The one outside these windows and the one Jonathan will unleash when he realizes what he's truly lost." Within the circle of Murray's arms, Amelia found herself anchored against both furies, the natural tempest and the man-made one surely brewing across the city. For the first time since leaving Jonathan, the future didn't loom as a terrifying uncertainty, but beckoned with possibilities previously unimagined. Across the city, in his penthouse office overlooking the storm-lashed skyline, Jonathan Pierce's phone chimed with an incoming message. His private investigator had sent photographs, grainy through rain-streaked windows, but clear enough to identify Murray Goodwin arriving at Amelia's apartment building, flowers in hand. Clear enough to capture them in the window, silhouetted by candlelight, locked in an embrace that spoke of far more than casual friendship. Jonathan's glass shattered against the wall, whiskey and crystal mingling in a constellation of destruction. The woman he'd considered his most valuable possession had not simply fled his control. She'd found refuge in the arms of a man who represented everything Jonathan disdained. Not a rival mogul or society player, but a photographer who valued substance over status. For the first time since Amelia had walked out, Jonathan felt something beyond incredulity and anger. As lightning illuminated his reflection in the window, face contorted with rage, he recognized the emotion burning through his veins. Loss, real loss, sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. The storm had only just begun to break. Chapter 9. Desperate Measures. Autumn painted the city in russet and gold, leaves spiraling from trees in elegant surrender to changing seasons. 6 weeks had passed since the night of the storm, 6 weeks of quiet dinners and lengthy walks, of kisses that grew increasingly confident, of Murray's hand finding Amelia's with the certainty of belonging. Amelia's divorce proceedings crawled forward through legal trenches. Each motion met with Jonathan's counter-motion, each proposed settlement rejected with increasing vitriol. Yet even this shadow couldn't dim the light growing within her. For the first time in years, she was writing again. Poetry that flowed from her fingertips in the quiet morning hours, words that captured her journey from captivity to freedom. Chet can drag out the legal battle all he wants, Amelia told Murray as they strolled through the park on a crisp October afternoon, golden leaves crunching beneath their feet. "I'm already free where it matters most." Murray squeezed her hand, pride evident in his amber eyes. "Your lawyer thinks he's running out of delaying tactics." "Sandra says he's exhausting even the judge's patience," Amelia confirmed, leaning slightly into Murray's solid warmth as a breeze scattered leaves around them. Apparently, his last filing was described as petulant. Murray laughed, the sound warming her more effectively than her woolen scarf. Not a word judges typically favor in legal documents. They continued their walk, discussing Murray's upcoming gallery opening rather than dwelling on Jonathan's tactics. This balance, acknowledging difficulties without allowing them to consume all oxygen, was one of the gifts of their evolving relationship. Murray never dismissed her concerns, but neither did he permit them to eclipse their present joy. "The gallery owner wants to feature becoming as the centerpiece," Murray said, referring to the silhouetted woman at sunset that had so moved Amelia during their early text exchanges. "She thinks it captures something universal, the moment of transformation between what was and what might be." "She's right," Amelia replied, remembering how that photograph had spoken directly to her soul during those first tentative steps toward freedom. "It's beautiful, Murray. Your work deserves to be seen." His smile held the particular warmth reserved solely for her, not just attraction or affection, but recognition of something kindred and precious. "Coming from my harshest critic, that means everything." The teasing reference to her thoughtful feedback on his portfolio, something Jonathan would have perceived as criticism to be crushed rather than insight to be valued, made Amelia laugh. "Your harshest critic who happens to think you're brilliant." Murray stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "My harshest critic who makes me better," he corrected, his expression growing serious. "Who sees beyond what's good to what could be exceptional." The autumn sun caught in his eyes, transforming them to molten amber. Amelia reached up to brush a fallen leaf from his shoulder, her touch lingering as joy expanded beneath her ribs. "I love you," she said simply, the words emerging without premeditation or calculation, natural as breath, inevitable as sunrise. Murray's intake of breath was audible, his eyes widening slightly before softening with such tenderness that Amelia felt it like physical warmth against her skin. "I love you too," he replied, voice husky with emotion. "Have since that day in the garden maze when you trusted me with your tears." Their kiss tasted of autumn sunshine and possibility, deeper than those first hesitant explorations during the thunderstorm, confident in shared feeling rather than tentative with discovery. When they parted, Amelia rested her head against Murray's chest, hearing the steady drumbeat of his heart beneath her ear. The peace of the moment shattered with the electronic chime of her phone. Amelia considered ignoring it, but years of conditioned responsiveness died hard. She pulled back slightly, retrieving her phone from her pocket to find a text from an unfamiliar number. "Check your email. Jonathan's gone nuclear." Cold dread replaced the warmth of moments before. Amelia's fingers trembled slightly as she opened her email to find a message from Sandra, with the subject line, "Urgent. Review immediately." Jonathan had filed an emergency motion claiming Amelia was emotionally unstable and engaging in reckless behavior that threatened her well-being. The evidence? Photographs of her with Murray, entering his apartment building, kissing in the park, emerging from a restaurant with his arm around her waist. Private investigator surveillance presented as concerned documentation from a worried husband. "He's trying to claim I'm mentally incompetent," Amelia whispered, disbelief warring with rage as she showed Murray the email. "That my leaving him and finding happiness is evidence of a breakdown." Murray's expression darkened, the muscle in his jaw tightening. "This is about control, not concern. He knows he'll never win permanent conservatorship," Amelia said, scanning the legal details. Sandra's email says his strategy is threefold. First, humiliate me publicly with psychiatric evaluations and courtroom spectacle. Second, try to get temporary control of my finances to drain my resources for fighting back. And third, isolate me from you by painting our relationship as predatory. He doesn't want you back, Murray realized. He wants to punish you for leaving, to make an example of what happens when someone escapes Jonathan Pierce's control. "It's about you," Amelia realized, scanning further through Sandra's email. "He specifically names you as taking advantage of her fragile mental state. He's trying to paint you as the villain in this narrative." "Let him," Murray replied, his voice calm despite the storm gathering in his eyes. Sandra can easily disprove his claims. It's not that simple, Amelia said, fear coiling in her stomach. He's requesting temporary conservatorship pending psychiatric evaluation. If granted, even temporarily, he could force me back to the mansion, cut off my access to funds, isolate me while building his case. The possibility hung between them, grotesque in its calculation. Jonathan knew the legal maneuver would ultimately fail, but success wasn't his goal. This was about punishment, about forcing Amelia into defensive posture, about disrupting the happiness he couldn't control. "What do you need?" Murray asked, the question simple yet profound in its respect for her agency, not rushing to solutions or taking charge, but centering her needs in this moment of crisis. "To get home," Amelia replied, already texting Sandra, "for an emergency meeting." "To fight back," Murray nodded, falling into step beside her as they changed direction toward her apartment. "I'm with you," he said simply. "However you need me to be." The three words, "I'm with you," carried more weight than declarations of love or protection. Not standing before her as shield, but beside her as equal partner in whatever battle approached. At her apartment, Amelia changed into clothes better, suited for a legal strategy session while Murray made coffee, his quiet efficiency in her kitchen a comfort amid the growing storm. When Sandra arrived 30 minutes later, she brought weathered determination and practical next steps. "We'll file our response tomorrow morning," the lawyer explained, spreading documents across Amelia's dining table. "Judge Michaels has seen these tactics before. She won't grant temporary conservatorship without substantial evidence, which he doesn't have." "But the hearing itself is damaging," Amelia observed, years with Jonathan having taught her the power of public perception. "Even if we win, the narrative is set. Poor, unstable Amelia, manipulation by her new boyfriend." Sandra's expression softened with rare sympathy. "Yes, that's exactly his strategy. He can't win you back, so he'll try to destroy what you're building." Murray, who had been quietly making notes while they talked, looked up with steel in his normally gentle eyes. "What if we change the narrative first?" Both women turned toward him, Sandra with cautious interest, Amelia with dawning realization of his meaning. "The gallery opening," Amelia said, connecting threads. "It's this Friday." Murray nodded, his expression thoughtful. "High-profile event, arts community, social influences, media coverage." "You want to go public with your relationship?" Sandra stated rather than asked, considering the strategy with professional assessment. "Preemptively control the story before Jonathan's hearing can set it." "Not just the relationship," Murray clarified, turning to Amelia with a question in his eyes. "Your journey, your strength, your art." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Beside her legal documents lay a leather portfolio, the collected poems she'd been writing since leaving Jonathan, raw and honest explorations of captivity and freedom. Murray had read them, encouraged her to consider publishing. She demurred, not ready to share such vulnerability with the world. Now, facing Jonathan's attempt to paint her as unstable, those private words suddenly seemed like armor rather than exposure. "My poetry," she whispered, understanding blooming. "Alongside your photographs." Murray nodded, careful to frame it as option rather than directive. "Not just becoming, but the series I've been working on. Transformation, rebirth, strength emerging from shadows." The concept crystallized between them, not just lovers making a public appearance, but artists revealing complementary visions. Not a woman fleeing a marriage, but a poet finding her voice. Not a rebound relationship, but a creative partnership rooted in mutual respect. It reclaims the power, Amelia realized, the knot of fear in her stomach loosening slightly. It tells our story before he can distort it. Sandra was already making notes, legal mind calculating angles and implications. "We'd need to coordinate messaging carefully," press release emphasizing your artistic collaboration. Jonathan's tactics exposed as attempts to silence your creative voice, not genuine concern for your well-being. As practical details unfolded around her, Amelia felt something unexpected bloom within her chest. Not just determination to fight, but anticipation of standing publicly in her truth. The girl who'd danced barefoot to Afrobeat music, who'd written poetry under moonlight, who'd dreamed beyond boundaries. That girl wasn't lost after all. She'd been gathering strength, finding words, preparing to emerge not despite Jonathan's attempts to silence her, but because of them. "We'll need to prepare for the worst," Sandra warned as she gathered her papers. "Jonathan still has connections throughout the city. He'll likely try something dramatic at the gallery itself." "Let him," Amelia said with newfound certainty. "We'll be ready." When Sandra left with a battle plan in place, Murray gathered Amelia into his arms, his embrace offering sanctuary without constraint. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, amber eyes searching hers for any hesitation. "Your poetry is deeply personal. Sharing it this way is terrifying," Amelia admitted, honesty flowing between them as naturally as breath. "But so was leaving Jonathan. So was falling in love with you. So was every step that brought me back to myself." Murray's smile held. Pride without possession, admiration without ownership. "Your courage continues to humble me." "Not courage," Amelia corrected gently. "Necessity. Moths fly toward light, not because they're brave, but because darkness isn't where they belong." Later that night, as they lay tangled in sheets still new to their shared warmth, Murray traced constellations on Amelia's bare shoulder. "Whatever happens Friday," he murmured against her temple, "whatever Jonathan tries next, remember you're not facing it alone." Amelia turned in his arms, finding his lips in the darkness. "I know," she whispered against his mouth. "That's what frightens him most." Across the city, Jonathan Pierce stood in his penthouse, staring at photographs of Amelia and Murray spread across his desk like playing cards in a losing hand. In one, Murray looked at Amelia with such naked adoration that even Jonathan, who'd never truly seen his wife, couldn't mistake it for anything but love. Something cold and desperate crystallized in his chest. If he couldn't reclaim her, couldn't control the narrative, couldn't force her back into the role he'd designed, perhaps it was time for more desperate measures. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a contact he'd never expected to use. "It's Pierce," he said when the call connected. "I need information about Murray Goodwin's past, whatever it takes." The storm clouds gathering on the horizon promised more than autumn rain. They heralded a tempest that would test not just Amelia's newfound strength, but the very foundations of the love she and Murray had built. Chapter 10. Hearts Reclaimed. The National Arts Gallery gleamed like a jewel against the twilight sky, its glass facade reflecting the last golden rays of sunset. Inside, the city's cultural elite mingled among pedestals and hanging displays, champagne flutes catching light. As attendees drifted between exhibits, tonight marked not just Murray Goodwin's most significant gallery opening, but a declaration of love and truth that would forever alter the narrative Jonathan had tried to control. Amelia stood in the small preparation room, fingers smoothing, non-existent wrinkles from her dress, a creation of flowing crimson silk that honored her grandmother's Ghanaian heritage with subtle kente cloth patterns along its hem. Her poetry collection, bound in handmade paper, rested on a nearby table, awaiting the joint unveiling with Murray's photography series. 10 minutes, the gallery owner announced, popping her head through the doorway. "Full house out there, every arts critic in the city, plus half the society pages." The news should have terrified her, Public speaking had been Jonathan's domain, Amelia relegated to silent, decorative presence at his side. Yet tonight, butterflies danced in her stomach, not from fear but anticipation. Tonight, she would stand not as someone's wife or someone's girlfriend, but as Amelia Peter, poet and woman reclaimed. The door opened again, revealing Murray in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the amber warmth of his eyes. He carried a small velvet box, expression both nervous and determined. "You're breathtaking," he said simply, crossing to where she stood before the mirror. "So are you," Amelia replied, turning to face him fully. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation, legal maneuvers countering Jonathan's accusations, artistic collaboration culminating in tonight's exhibition, their relationship deepening through each challenge rather than fracturing beneath its weight. Murray took her hands in his, thumbs brushing across her knuckles in the gentle caress that had become his signature. "Before we go out there, I wanted to give you something." The velvet box opened to reveal not a diamond. Amelia had enough cold, glittering stones to last several lifetimes, but an emerald set in hammered gold, its deep green depths catching. "Light like a forest pool in sunshine?" "It was my grandmother's," Murray explained, voice husky with emotion. "She told me to save it for the woman who taught me to see beauty in unexpected places." Tears gathered in Amelia's eyes, not from the gift itself but the timing, not as possession or claim, but offering on the night she stepped fully into her own power. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like its new owner," Murray replied, lifting the ring but not yet placing it on her finger. "This isn't a proposal, not yet. We've both been through too much to rush into forever." Relief and gratitude flooded Amelia's chest at his understanding. Another man might have seized this moment for grand gestures and public claims. Murray recognized her need to finish becoming herself before joining her life with another's. "It's a promise," he continued, "that whatever comes next, we face it as equals. That I'll never ask you to be less so I can feel more. That I'll spend every day making sure you know how deeply you are loved, not for what you give or how you look, but for who you are." Amelia extended her right hand, not the left that would signify engagement, but the hand that wrote poetry, that had signed divorce papers, that had helped rebuild her life from ashes. "I accept your promise," she said, voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat, "and offer one in return, to never again surrender my voice or truth to keep someone else comfortable, to remember always that love should expand, not diminish." Murray slipped the ring onto her finger, its weight unfamiliar yet right, a talisman of possibility rather than ownership. When he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles just above the emerald's glow, Amelia felt the last pieces of her heart slide into perfect alignment. Broken, healed, stronger at the mended places. Ready to change the narrative? Murray asked, eyes alight with pride and love. "Ready?" Amelia confirmed, lacing her fingers with his as they moved toward the gallery's main exhibition space. The crowd fell silent as they emerged hand in hand, camera flashes capturing their entrance. Not as scandal but as celebration. Murray guided her to the center of the room, where their creative collaboration stood veiled, waiting for revelation. "Good evening," Murray began, his photographer's eye taking in the assembled crowd with calm assessment. "Thank you for joining us for what we've titled Becoming, Light After Darkness." Amelia stepped forward, her voice finding strength with each word. "Art has always been humanity's most honest mirror, reflecting not just what is visible, but what lies beneath appearances. Tonight's exhibition explores one woman's journey from silence to voice, from possession to selfhood." Murray squeezed her hand gently before releasing it to unveil the centerpiece, a triptych of photographs capturing Amelia's transformation. The first showed her at the garden fountain, tears on her cheeks but determination in her eyes. The second, silhouetted, against sunset on the coastal road, arms outstretched toward possibility. The third, taken just weeks ago, laughing in autumn sunlight, face alive with authentic joy. Beside each photograph hung framed pages from Amelia's poetry collection, words and images in perfect conversation across mediums, not the polished society wife Jonathan had crafted, but a woman of depth and courage, finding her way back to herself. Applause rippled through the gallery as critics and patrons moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty of both photographs and verse. Amelia felt, rather than saw, movement at the entrance, a familiar figure cutting through the crowd with cold purpose. Jonathan Pierce stood motionless at the gallery's threshold, immaculate in bespoke tailoring that couldn't disguise the fury. In his eyes, he carried a thick manila envelope, ammunition gathered through whatever desperate measures he'd employed since their last legal skirmish. The room's atmosphere shifted as recognition spread. Jonathan had clearly expected to ambush Amelia with whatever the envelope contained, to disrupt her moment of triumph with fresh accusations. Instead, he found himself audience to her undeniable strength, her artistic voice silencing his attempts to dismiss her as unstable or manipulated. Amelia moved toward him with steady steps, Murray a reassuring presence at her side. Not confrontational, not cowering, but centered in newfound certainty. "Jonathan," her voice carried across the hushed gallery. Not a question, not a plea. A simple statement of fact. His eyes registered something beyond fury, confusion, disbelief, perhaps recognition that this woman, poised, confident, creatively powerful, shared nothing but a name with the carefully controlled wife he'd thought. He knew this spectacle changes nothing. He gestured dismissively toward the exhibition, voice tight with barely contained rage. Amelia met his gaze steadily. "The hearing won't happen. Judge Michaels reviewed our response," she continued, strength flowing through each word. "Your motion was denied with prejudice." The manila envelope crumpled slightly in Jonathan's grip. Whatever ammunition it contained, accusations against Murray, manipulated evidence of Amelia's supposed instability, had lost its power in this room filled with witnesses to her clear-eyed strength. "You never knew me," Amelia continued, compassion rather than accusation in her tone. "Not. Really, you collected me like your art and cars, valuable but ultimately replaceable." Jonathan's jaw tightened, unused to such direct truth-telling from the woman he'd systematically diminished. "You think this photographer knows you better after a few months?" Dismissal dripped from each syllable. "No," Murray said quietly. Surprising. Both Amelia and Jonathan. "I'm still learning who Amelia is, who she's becoming now that she's free to exist without constraint. The difference is, I find that journey beautiful rather than threatening." Something cracked in Jonathan's perfect facade. Not surrender, but perhaps the first recognition that what he'd lost wasn't coming back. Without another word, he turned and left, the envelope falling forgotten from his hand to the gallery floor. Amelia released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, turning to find Murray watching her with such tender pride that her heart expanded almost painfully in her chest. "You were magnificent," he whispered, gathering her hands in his. "We were," she corrected, the simple plural encompassing everything that Jonathan had never understood about love. That true partnership multiplied strength rather than dividing it. As the exhibition resumed around them, Murray drew her into a quiet alcove away from curious eyes and clicking cameras. In the private space between public moments, he gathered her close, his kiss like coming home after too long in exile, passionate yet reverent, claiming nothing but offering everything. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. Not the woman in the photographs or the poet on those pages, though they're miraculous. I love the woman becoming all those things and more, the one who'll surprise me every day with new depths and possibilities. Amelia wound her arms around his neck, emerald catching light as her fingers threaded through his hair. "I love you too," she whispered, "for seeing me when I'd forgotten how to see myself, for waiting while I remembered how to stand alone before choosing to stand with you." Their kiss deepened, the gallery's sounds fading to background as they created their own sanctuary of touch and truth. Outside, Jonathan Pierce's car pulled away from the curb, his manila envelope of accusations abandoned on the gallery floor. His last attempt at control, rendered powerless against the strength of a woman who had finally reclaimed her voice. But tonight, in this perfect moment suspended between what was and what would be, Amelia Peter found herself exactly where she belonged, not in a cage, however gilded, but in a love that expanded rather than confined. Not possessed, but chosen. Not diminished, but celebrated in all her complex, beautiful becoming. The emerald on her right hand caught the gallery lights, a promise of possibility rather than ownership. One day, perhaps soon, it might be joined by another ring on her left hand. But that decision, like all others in her reclaimed life, would come from strength rather than fear, from choice rather than surrender. For now, this moment was enough. Her words on the walls, her truth in the open, her heart finally completely free.